Well, good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to see you here today. And I'm going to digress for a couple of minutes because certain things came to my attention and it reminded me of something my mother did. So we are going to get to something that makes sense eventually. The first do not seem to, but they came to my attention over the past few days, and they're all animal-related news items that showed up. The first one was concerned a dog, and I found this on Twitter, my Twitter feed, where I go to for news, of course, but this is what showed up. And this guy says, my dog had one job. It's some sort of lab mutt, very happy one, as of this day. Has one job, and that's to be guard dog at night, and to bark at any critter that would come into the yard and chase it off. However, our dog has not done that, because a local bear has discovered that if the bear comes into the yard with several deer bones and drops it for the dog will remain silent while the trash can is raided. This has occurred at least 3 times. And my wife quipped, well, that puts a new meaning to the bear market now, doesn't it? So watch out, wildlife is developing their own currency for their own purposes. The second is a historical note dealing with animals again. Now, in God's creation, you must respect all living creatures, and there's a reason for that. In July of 1809, I believe it was, to commemorate the signing of a particular treaty, Napoleon Bonaparte, the conqueror of Europe, decided that he would have a large rabbit hunt for him and his friends, and they would conquer some bunnies with hunting equipment. Well, apparently they released somewhere between hundreds and 3,000 rabbits. It's not determined how many, but they expected the rabbits to scurry away and they would hunt them, right? Well, apparently rabbits can do math themselves. They looked around, they saw that there were many fewer human beings than there were rabbits, and they decided they'd have none of it. They attacked. And the great Napoleon was reduced to defending himself with sticks and rocks until he could beat a hasty retreat to his carriage and flee. So, another story about wildlife. You need to respect God's living creatures, or they will turn on you. And third, this is why we're getting here. For Mother's Day, I remember years ago, we had a brand new dachshund, very young Brandy, and we were watching a football game with a team that shall not be mentioned. A team well known for stripping defeat from the jaws of victory. And we were letting them know what we thought of them. And the dog, my mother discovered, was terrified, thinking that we were yelling at the dog. She picked up the dog, comforted Brandy, and scolded us, saying, look what you're doing to this dog. And so for the rest of the game, we were all going, you, very quietly. Moms have that effect on you. So those are my animal stories for the moment. I won't be getting back to that again. Now we'll deal with the sermon of Mother's Day. Early in the 20th century, the Methodist Sunday school teacher Anna Jarvis decided, from Grafton, West Virginia, my neck of the woods, as a matter of fact, that they needed to commemorate Mom. She was instrumental in the creation of Mother's Day. She wanted to recognize mothers, starting with her own, who in their lives acted as peacemakers and were advocating for the social good, things that her mother had done. And my mother, Mary Alice Snyder, she was a peacemaker busy with 2 boys who were 6 years apart. And she was instrumental in advocating for social good, and she changed my life by doing that. She gave me an ultimatum one day. I was a bookworm, about 13 years old. She says, Jeff, you have 2 choices. You can either take tennis lessons, or you can join a volunteer archaeology group that I've heard of. Well, I disappointed my mom. I went for the volunteer archaeology group because I had no interest in tennis lessons, although she wanted to play tennis. I didn't know that at the time. And that changed my life. Volunteering will do that to you, as we discovered and discussed last week at our congregational meeting. Now there's another woman named Tabitha or Dorcas, depending on which culture you're in, who lived a life that was very active in offering social good to others. She would meet the original definition of Mother's Day very nicely. This woman lived in a complicated intersection of the Jewish and the Gentile world, not too dissimilar from where we live today. Her Jewish name is Tabitha, and in Greek, her name is Dorcas, both of them mean gazelle, which suggests that she was graceful and swift. So, Tabitha was noted for her faith and her compassion. She was a Christian, and she was described as a disciple. And she was devoted to good works and to acts of charity. And when the author of Luke Acts calls someone a disciple, it has a particular meaning. It means that person has been baptized to follow Jesus, has devoted themselves to a life of healing and reconciliation, is willing to confront religious and political power when they believe they're doing wrong, and is someone who lives under the power of love. This is a tall order, but this is what Tabitha was doing. She was a disciple providing provision and compassion for the poorest members of her community, for the most desperate around her. And most of them were Gentile, were other than her own faith. The Reverend theologian William Willimon, he made this powerful statement concerning the Christian community that she was living in at that time. He says, here's this new community where no one stays put. You've got common fishermen who are out preaching to the temple authorities. You've got paralyzed old men who are getting up and walking and going about their business. And, I'm sorry, I've got to use paper today. My computer is rebelling. It decided this was the time to update the program. It's okay. And changing lives. And a woman called Gazelle. She heads a welfare program among the poor in Joppa. In her work, Tabitha was busy making a new configuration of power in which God uses what is lowly and despised in the world to bring new things about. Tabitha was fulfilling Jesus' calling from Matthew 25:36. I was naked and you gave me clothes. Losing Tabitha would not only be a great sorrow to her community, but it would heighten the insecurity that some at the lowest levels of society were feeling. And they felt this loss very severely. Most churches can point to at least one person in their congregation quietly working behind the scenes, filling that kind of role. At least one, sometimes more. And they miss them greatly when they move on to their eternal reward, or in these days have to move to another state. So, we have an opportunity to serve in that way right now. We've discovered that the SNAP program doesn't provide its participants with toiletries and things they need to make their lives better and their hygiene better. And so we're gathering together those things. We're asking for volunteers to do that. We'll keep them in a cabinet, and people who need them will be able to go and get them as needed. And I know the food cupboard does the same thing, and we also support the food cupboard to feed people like that. So, meanwhile, about 10 miles away, Peter, who Jesus rescued on the beach, as we heard last week, is now again the rock of the church, and he's out just about everywhere. They say he was going here and there. I mean, he's all over the place, proclaiming Jesus. And he's now in the town of Lyyda, which is the capital of that region. It's near the port city of Joppa. That's where Tabitha is. And he's healing a paralyzed man named Aeneas. And this is another Gentile individual with a name that was famous in lore. So this would be somebody that go, oh, I know that name. And he looked at him and he says to him, Jesus Christ heals you, get up and make your bed. Gives them something practical to do right away. Tabitha falls ill in the meantime and dies quite suddenly. Shocks her community. And the local widowed women who were following Tabitha, they wash her and prepare her for burial, and they put her up in the attic room of the house to await that evening's burial. They would have somebody buried by the end of the day. And Tabitha's work in her community, empowered by the Holy Spirit, was considered so impactful to her whole community that when she died, they decided they needed to get Peter here. They sent runners 10 miles to Lyyda, calling for Peter, the rock of the church, to come to Joppa, where Tabitha was prepared for burial. And that would happen at sundown, so his hours to come were very short. And they didn't give an explanation for why they wanted him to come, but they just felt that it was so important what she had done that they wanted him to recognize what she had done and recognize her life's work. They didn't put any expectations on Peter, they just wanted him there. And so the widows are upstairs and they're awaiting Peter, they're weeping. These aren't professional mourners as they had back in the day. These were people who were generally grieving over Tabitha's loss. And when Peter arrives, they pick up tunics and clothing that Tabitha had made herself and says, "See this? She made this for the people of this community. She made these things for the poor and for those who were without. She helped our community. She was very important to us." And these widows are not just the poor. Sometimes you have the widows, and it's a shorthand for saying people who are poor. But these were widows who were following Tabitha, continuing her work, inspired by what she had done. They were under her influence. They were following her ways, and they were not just preparing her for burial. Tabitha had been willing to use her own resources and her own energy to serve other people, those who were oppressed in an unjust and unfair system that kept them down. It's reflective of Acts 2, 43 through 47, where wonders and signs were being performed by the Christians in that community, inspiring awe in others and growing their community, a community that shared all that they had with each other and with those in need. And this is a continuation of this in a far-off city. And Peter is so moved by what he hears that he puts himself at personal risk, and the way he says, "Everybody leave. Leave me alone for a minute. Get out." And he prays. He calls upon this power of the Holy Spirit. And he prays for Tabitha to be healed. And this is an example of resurrection hope following the resurrection of Jesus for this entire community. It's another gift that's provided for them. This is in this action, Tabitha's example of generosity is shown to carry on and lives on amongst its people. And we hope that this will live on amongst us. This willingness of Tabitha, powered by the Holy Spirit, to help other people, calling on us to help those who are in need and to inspire awe in others to do likewise, reaching out to the less privileged, to the widows, to the indigent, the hungry, the depressed, the addicted, the marginalized, the oppressed, and the penalized. How many of us have been influenced in some way or another by modern-day Tabithas? Think about that for a minute. How many times in your life have somebody reached out to you in that way and made a difference in your life? It gets us right back to the original purpose of the Mother's Day as envisioned by Anna Jarvis there at the beginning of our service, honoring all those who've done service for others. Peter used the Holy Spirit to bring new life to Tabitha, bringing assurance to the community that the power of new life is brought to all through Jesus Christ and his resurrection, that the power that flows directly into and brought life from God is the power available to us all. It brought hope that the structures of oppression in the world that try to keep us down won't last forever, that God's power for love and justice and mercy and hope and generosity will outlast every evil system as those systems falter and die one after another. As Peter said to Tabitha, so we, the church, can say to our society, rise. When the system leaves over 30 million children in the U.S. in poverty, when far too many die far too young as a result, the simple story of Luke calls to us just as Anna Jarvis' mother's work called to her, just as Tabitha's called to her community, and the message we share with others is rise to the help of others. Originally the community called Peter because they wanted him to recognize Tabitha's efforts and who Tabitha was as a disciple. This virtual saint amongst them. This was a witness of love, responding to the love that she had provided for the community. And may we all inspire others to such witnesses at some point. When we love, that love ripples out. It touches others. It inspires a community to love. Inspired by the Holy Spirit, igniting communities to love. It brings hope and sustenance to many as a result. They will know we are Christians by our love isn't just a catchy hymn, it's the truth. Widows were showing Peter Tabitha's handmade work. They were showing him that she cared about her community. She knew her people personally. And she made this work herself to give to them as gifts and offerings of hope and love. And that's why they responded with love and grief for their loss. Luke never tells us if Tabitha was rich or poor. And as with many things Luke did, there was a point to that. He doesn't tell us on purpose, because he wants Tabitha's example of sacrificial love to be an example for everyone, at all and any economic level in their lives, inspiring everyone to give self-sacrificially at whatever level they're capable of giving, influencing lives far and wide throughout history. It's a pretty good thing to aim for. If Tabitha could move so many in one community, imagine what a whole community of people dedicated to doing that could do. Well, from her other name, Dorcas, we've known her for many years. There have been Dorcas societies in many churches, continuing her work down through the centuries. They're still active today. And Tabitha, of course, was her Jewish name. Dorcas was her Greek name. And Tabitha was a Jewish Christian living amongst the Greeks, bringing Christian generosity and love to Gentile peoples, spreading the gospel to a culture other than her own, loving people who were far different from her. And look at the results that came from that. Let that inspire us. And I'll give you just one story today of where I saw love and its reciprocation. And it came from Reverend Beverly Everett's son. He set up a site and he tells stories on there and people can interact with her that way. And he said the other day, they discovered at the hospital that she had a heart condition. She had heart surgery a few years ago. And when they discovered that, they realized they'd made an oversight in their meal plan. And they put her on a heart-healthy meal plan. And when they did, it removed one of her favorite things, which is strawberry shortcake. I'm now tempted to go over to the Empire Diner and get one of the really big ones and take it with me. But her son saw this, and her son remembered all the things that his mom had done for him. And he went up to the nursing staff and said, you know, can you bend your policy a little bit for Mom? She'd really like to have that shortcake. The nurse looks at him and says, honey, what she got? Said, inoperable brain tumor. Oh, heck, give her whatever she wants. Not only does she have strawberry shortcake on the dinner menu to check, it's on all her menus now. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She can have whatever she wants. Love and love reciprocate. It's the power of love in action. Let's be inspired by Tabitha. Let's take Mother's Day back to its peacemaking and social concerns origins. Let's make it about love and help for others and see how that can ripple outwards, touching the lives of many with love. And as I ask the kids regularly, can we do it? Will we do it? Let's pause for a moment of silence. Amen. Now, please rise as you're able for